Okie doke, back to it. Let me make sure the mic's on the right setting. Cool. Yeah, we're good. Should be. Alright, continuing handling errors. This time using standard character input, which has a member function called ignore. And ignore takes two parameters. One of them is how big of a stream size. It sounds like how many characters, how many things. I think it's how many characters, but maybe not. How many characters we ignore until we reach a certain. So, how many characters we're going to ignore unless we reach a certain character. So, if it's 10, we ignore 10 characters. But if we have 7 characters and then we have a character we want to ignore and we hit that, we don't keep ignoring until 10. We just stop right there. But if we don't see that character until after the number, then we go ahead and ignore the number. So 9.5, this is like, what is it, acceptable or what is it? It's valid input, but it's, oh, there it is, extraneous, there it is. I didn't have this saved, so now we're good. Okay, cool. All right, so yeah, last time we had a program and we were using, I think we were just using input and output, but we need, what is it called? C limits? I think that's what it is, or include limit? Oh, it might actually just be limits, I don't know. But, so we could do this one way. Oops. Well, we could do this and then put in the number of characters, so we could just say 100. And then we could say, we'll ignore until we see K. Or, as long as we see K before 100. So, we ignore K if it's within 100, otherwise we ignore 100 characters. Or rather, we ignore 100 characters unless we see K before we hit 100. So, this is one way, but the problem here is that we want to clear the entire remaining shit in the buffer. We don't want to just choose some specific number because I don't know how big a buffer is. Let's say it's 1 billion characters. I don't want to well, I don't know if it matters if you pass in an incorrect amount. So like if you use up 10 characters and then you ignore the entire size of the buffer, does that over ignore? Does it start ignoring extra shit, or is that okay as is? Because if it is, then we could just figure out whatever. Oh, well, actually, that's exactly what we're doing. We need to know how big a buffer is so that we could ignore everything remaining. So we want to ignore, or we'll clear the rest of the buffer, which means we have to figure out how much is left in a buffer, or instead just how big is a buffer? How big is a buffer? Or at least how big is the buffer of input output, or at least in this case, how big is the buffer of input? How big is the input buffer, or you could say the standard character input buffer. So we're gonna include, what is it? C limits? No, it's just limits. So we include limits, and we can get numeric limits, and I guess there are non-numeric limits. So if we want to get the numeric limit of a stream size, I guess you could say there's like a minimum limit and a maximum limit maybe. So we can use numeric limits, and we pass in the type we're trying to convert to, or the type that we're trying to find the limit of. So a stream size, or it seems like max. Yeah, it seems like we're passing in the type that we're trying to find it, which means that the value that this outputs is of whatever type this needs. So we should be able to pass this then for something that takes a stream size, because I think when we get input and output stream, right here. It takes a stream size and then some number for that. So if we're getting the maximum size, which is within the library, or at least the namespace numeric limits, unless this is a class, but I'm just treating it as a namespace because I don't know what classes are just yet technically. So we're finding the size of a standard stream. So so standard stream size. So this seems like this is a type within the standard library, and then there's a namespace that is able to get the max of this type. And if this is invalid, then I guess it is what it is. Like if I passed it a type that it couldn't find the max of, I'm not sure what it would do, but so it seems like we get this. And so this is numeric limits. And I don't know how we describe this, like where this, what we call here. Because like this part, it looks like max is a function within the numeric limits namespace. But then there's this template part, this type. And it's not, I guess it's not a parameter, but it's like some sort of piece of numeric limits. And maybe it's optional, maybe it isn't required. So we could do, I think we need to include, we need limits. And then we also need, I guess we technically don't need input and output, so we can try it without that. So we could say standard numeric limits. Oh, nothing. Oh, so it takes a type here. Type name type. So we could say, I think, is it standard stream size? Is that what it's called? I'll just go through this, and then once I get through this, then I'll work on it. Yep. So we basically want to clear the whole rest of the buffer. So, or in this case, if we say it's this huge number, well, if we're getting input, the user has to enter an inline character, a \n, in order to submit the input, which means we're ignoring everything until we see that, and then boom, we're good. And this returns the maximum of this type of numeric limit, so it's the maximum limit of a stream size. Yeah, so the largest value, or seems like the number. Well, yeah, so I guess you could say the buffer stores a value. I was thinking of it as like the buffer was storing some number of characters, but it seems like it's actually one whole thing. I don't know, it seems like maybe it's both. And if we pass this, which is a number, this is a number of, this is the limit, whatever the hell a stream size can hold. We pass it to ignore as the stream size number to ignore. Oh, if we pass it, disable the count check. Count check? I don't know why we're calling it a count check, but it seems like it's basically making this part moot and saying, yo, just ignore until we see this. Everything until we see this. But it's not removing or disabling the count check, I don't think. It's just saying, hey, everything. That's how much you're ignoring. So to ignore everything until this, we pass this guy here. And so numeric limits requires this type part, and then we can use the scope resolution operator to go into numeric limits and get the max function that it has, which is interesting. I don't know how. I mean, I figure you can make whatever these are. You can make a namespace or a class. It seems like this isn't a class because we saw member functions for like a second, and those are called with the dot operator. So it's class dot member function parentheses. But in this case, it's the scope resolution operator. So it tells me, I at least think, that it's a namespace that has the max function in it. But something about numeric limits or about the max function, seems like it's not the max function. It seems like it's something about numeric limits requires this type part. So it has something to do with templates. Okay. And it makes sense that every time we want to, so if we get input and then we want to ignore the rest of the shit after we've already, so we get input, save it. Instead of extracting more from the buffer, we want to clear the whole buffer, which reprompts the user or prompts the user to enter more input because the buffer is clear. It doesn't have anything to extract once it tries to extract. So instead of calling this whole thing every time, saying every single time, ignore or for character input, let's see, standard character input, ignore. So it seems like this is how we get the stuff within the input buffer. And we say, it seems like this is a type or a class or something, and this is a member function to it, because this is called differently than this. This looks like a function in a namespace. This looks like a member function of a class, or an object, I guess. Seems like the same thing, because you create objects of a class. Excuse me. So character input is an object. Seems like it's an I stream, input stream. Okay. And so we just make a function to say, hey, call this function to ignore everything else that's in the input buffer right now. And it seems like there are different types of buffers. So like, I could put in yeah, it is, because there's input that's coming from the user and then it is put somewhere. That's different than the output buffer, it seems like, for sure, because the input buffer, I don't think that info would go into the same pool, the same container as the output. So it makes sense that in order to clear that, we have to use the character input type object, something like that, in order to remove it from the buffer. Okay. And then we can just call this function to clear the rest of whatever it is. So it seems like we have a program. Maybe we don't need this just yet. Let's say, yeah, I'll just test it out real quick. So we'll do it, no header file. Include, we need input and output. Need standard character input at least right now. And then we also want limits. Need standard numeric limits for the maximum value in a stream size can hold, i.e. how many chars the input stream can hold, so we can ignore it all. Okay. So I can have a function here, and we can just call it void clear input buffer, and then we can say I'm going to do standard character input ignore, and then we want to pass in a number, so number of characters, or value size to ignore, or something like value size to ignore, and then char to ignore until, something like that. So we're going to do standard numeric limits, and then we need to pass in, it seems like a standard stream size. Standard stream size. Okay. And then, oh yeah, right here, this is where we need to go into numeric limits to get, oh, so there's max, there's min, lowest. So maybe I can max min. I don't know what the difference between the min and the max are. It's interesting. Is it in the same file? I don't know. Okay. And we'll just say max. Okay. Then I can just take this whole thing, parenthesize it just to make sure it's good, precedence and whatnot, and then we'll ignore until the end line character. Cool. We'll compile right quick. And then we can say a function to get. I wonder how that works for strings. So string, or at least in standard getLine, you get all of it, and it extracts all of the input buffer, it seems like, to this one. Excuse me. Extracts it all to the variable, the string that we're storing it to. Seems like you don't have to use this for getLine. But we could say for getting an integer, getting a character, these kind of things. Okay. And so what do we test? We'll do a character first. Character, get user character. And then we'll just do, there's a character variable. It can't be constant because we have to update it to assign it value, and constant expression variables cannot be changed once initialized, and they're required to be initialized. So it's a character, user character, its value initialized to be 0, and then we can say standard character input to it. We could prompt the user here, so we can do that. We could say enter a character, enter a character, and then we can return the character. Cool. But what we want to do here is, after storing this value, we don't want to have to create a variable here that, like, we could do character we could do get user operator. Oh, sorry. This is user operator, and we'll initialize it to B. I'm gonna fix this so I get used to. Okay, oops, deleting instead of just backspacing. We're gonna have user operator. We're gonna do another function in a second here, but instead of initializing this guy using get user character and then having to call ignore after, it makes sense for every time we get a character, we just ignore afterwards. Every time we get an integer, just ignore everything else so that we don't extract all the rest. So if someone put in a bunch of numbers and then characters, and we were getting a user integer, it would extract the integers probably to the integer variable that we have, but then the characters would remain. Well, the characters were misinputs or something like that. We don't want to store them. We want to make sure that the user is entering input standalone. When we ask for a number, they enter a number. When we ask for a character, they enter a character. That's it. So if we get a mixed input, we want to clear the rest. That way, they're 100% sure of what they're putting in. So in this case, then we're going to call clear input buffer like that. Just going to compile just to do this, which is fine. This is a little warning. All right, and now we're going to do, so they're just getting a character, but then we're going to say, we're going to have another function. This is getting any character from the user. This is clearing the input buffer. But then we're going to have another character returning function called get user operator. And this takes in, so does this take anything? This just, there might be there might be a better way of doing this, but I want to initialize this with the return value of get user operator. And get user operator will continually call user character until the user enters a valid character that is a mathematical operator. Okay, and then we'll have a switch case to check. So this is the prompt. I'm trying to think if we want it to be here or not. Yeah, maybe this makes sense. Okay, get user operator. We'll have a character. Seems maybe not the best way because we're saying, hey, initialize this. And this is, okay, there's a character. And this gets initialized this way. It seems like it's fine. I think so. Alright, so we'll say there's a character, and we'll just call it the same thing. We'll call it user operator, and it's initialized to be get user character's return value. And this just gets any character from user. And this guy is pretty self-explanatory. Ignores everything or an entire stream size till like that. We're ignoring the entire stream size. Alright, and then here okay. So this is just a character. Or not. So we want to then check. So we'll say okay. So this probably makes more sense. We'll just value initialize them here. And then we'll say do. Do we want to do anything else? We could say I'll go ahead and give this a block. Do user operator gets assigned the value of get user character. Okay. Okay. And then could do there was something recent that I learned too. Do we switch on it? We could switch on the user operator. Then check to make sure that it's a valid mathematical operator. I think we could switch. I don't think we need a do while loop. I think we can just... Or do we need that? Because each time it checks. So we say default. So we could have a boolean. This is too much. Bool user operator is valid. At first it's not valid. Then we'll say we'll assign it value. and then we'll switch on the user operator, and then we'll say case. There's this. And we want fall through on purpose, so we could say what happens if I just say fall through? Fuck. I don't know if I have to, like, where I use that part. Damn. I'll have to think about that in a sec. We want case for this, case for another one that's valid, so we have subtraction. Okay, bro. Oops. Did I? Oh, I guess I did do that. Case for multiplication. Oops. Oops. Again. Case for division. Case for remainder. I think that's fine. Okay. And for these, it'll be, say, user operator is valid, is now true, and then we'll break, and then the default case is it's already invalid by default, so we could just say break because it's already not valid. Yeah. Okay. Okay. So we'll get the user operator, and then we'll say assign it value, which we need to do at least once, so we have to do it. And then we check it. And then if he's valid, if it's a valid case, we make him valid. Otherwise, we leave him invalid. And we're doing this while not user operator is valid. Like that. Okay. Okay. And then we will return user operator. And right now we're just not using user operator just yet. And so we will initialize them using get user operator. And then say and this will clear the buffer after we get it, so we should be able to do another one because it'll only extract hopefully one character. And then we could say character user operator 2, so we could just say 1 and 2. Get user operator, and then we can output first operator. Excuse me, user operator 1. And then we could say second operator, user operator 2, like that. Cool. In this case, it looks like fall through is actually, oh, because we're not having fall through between. So if we did this, we'd probably have a fall through issue here. Really? We don't? I'm surprised. What is this part? Okay. So we could say enter a character, and we do 2 characters. Oh, and then actually we want to do say invalid character try again. And then here, say, oops, valid character. Oh, what is happening here? Oops, did not semicolon. What was the error there? Missing a semicolon before the break makes sense. Okay, it's a valid character. And then we could do this. Oh, invalid character, and then we could do plus. And the characters should be multiplication and then addition. We got multiplication and addition. Cool. Or we could just do test operator test get user operator. And then we'll just have a void function called test get user operator, because that's called get user operator. And we'll say, what would we want here? None of these even, could we even test this? No, because we're using standard character input. So we could replace this, but no, I don't even think we need that. It's fine as is. This is one that you just have to test on your own. So we have a function that clears the buffer. Then little character getter. So to actually get a value and initialize a character in this case, you want to return a valid character, which means you could get the character and then check if it's valid and then return. But maybe that would make sense if we just did get user operator and then we don't care about just getting a user character. But in this case, we already have get user character, so you may as well just do the check here in this function. So by calling get user operator, you're getting a character and checking if it's valid. Or you could just get the user character. I think this is okay. Seems like it's alright. Yeah. I'm gonna go to the bathroom real quick and then I'm gonna do some of that again.